I want to start off with a bit of a story from the Bible. So those that may have read this, you probably understand it. But in case you haven't, in the book of Jonah. So in talking about the difference between the failure and avoidance and how avoidance itself actually causes failure, or how avoidance itself is actually worse than failure. So the story in a short version is Jonah is a Hebrew prophet who was given an instruction by God to go to Nineveh. He decided to avoid that and go the opposite way. He decided to escape the word that he was given and escape the completely opposite way. Now, what then happened in his process of avoidance from the thing he was supposed to do? What then happened is chaos took over. He got thrown overboard by the people that were on the ship after understanding what had happened. He got taken by a big fish, which we assume is a whale, and taken into the abyss for 3 days. Now, after 3 days, he was then actually taken to the place he was supposed to be. Now, the story depicts him as someone who actually then was enlightened at the point that he was taken to the place that he was. But essentially, in this short version of a story, which you can read in a bit more context, is there's the calling that you have, and then you avoid it, and then you get the redemption if you then actually act on the thing that you were avoiding. Essentially, what this shows is the failure of Jonah itself was caused by the avoidance, and the avoidance itself is what was the worst part of the whole story. Now, that's not an isolated story just about Jonah. If you really think about it, you probably go through that a lot of times. And this is what we want to talk about today, how failure is corresponding with the avoidance and how avoidance is actually worse. Now, there's 4 things I want us to just quickly go through in terms of the avoidance itself, why avoidance is worse than the failure itself. So the first thing is it stops you from learning. Avoiding stops you from learning. If there's something that you think you're supposed to do and you're too scared to do it, or you're scared of the failure or the anticipated failure, you actually stop trying, and therefore you don't actually learn. And that becomes your long-term thing. You won't ever get to know about it. So essentially, avoiding risks prevents you from actually learning about it, right? The second thing is it shrinks your comfort zone. Your comfort zone expands as you try new things. So if you're avoiding the failure or avoiding the risks themselves that come with the failure, your comfort zone will continue shrinking. So essentially, the more you avoid, the smaller your world becomes. In what you try to do in trying to expand your comfort zone is trying new things. And if you don't try the new things, you stay in where you are. In fact, you don't even stay where you are. You continue shrinking and continue shrinking. So your comfort zone shrinks. Number 3 is it creates anxiety. So failure itself isn't the big problem. It's avoiding failure. Therefore, you don't take the risks. By not taking the risks, you're avoiding as many of them as possible. And therefore, the issues that you think are going to happen are much bigger in your head than they are in reality. So by exploring these things, you realize that whatever problem you think you're going to be facing is actually smaller in reality than it is in your head. Therefore, if you don't risk trying, it will stay as big as possible, and that's where you create a massive amount of anxiety. Now, the 4th thing is it wastes potential. So in the talents that you have, in the capabilities that you have, you don't know how much of it you have until you try something. You think you might be a good or bad football player, for example, but if you don't try playing, you won't know, and you won't be able to see the talent that you have unless you actually give it a try. That's the 4th part, the wasting of talent or the waste of potential that is caused by the avoiding. Now, see this. In not trying, you actually make the things worse. Therefore, it's not the failure itself that's caused you to be in that position. It's avoiding the risk of succeeding or success itself because you're worried about failure. Most of us actually worry more about the failure, so much so we don't even try and live in avoidance, than the failure itself. And when you realize majority of people, or whoever you can think of right now, who you would class as someone who's successful, it's not because they've been good at everything that they do all the way through. It's because they just failed their way through it. They chose not to avoid the risk. They chose not to stay in the same spot or shrink their comfort zones. They take the risk of trying it, therefore face the potential failure of itself to then get to the success. So avoidance in this aspect or in this idea is much bigger than the failure itself. And that's what I wanted us to show today. I know it's a very short one today, and I wanted us to just look at it in that aspect. What are you avoiding? And the task for you today is look at what you're avoiding and tackle it. Take the risk and go for it. Put yourself at risk of success. Hope what I shared today was useful. Feel free to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you think any of this stuff has been useful to you or might be useful to someone else, please feel free to share it as well. And I'll see you next time. Take care, guys.